seek to enter Victoria Land. What is Victoria Land, and who is Victoria, and why should you listen to anything she has to say? Hello, my name is Victoria, and this is my story, and I'm sticking to it because it's a true story. I'm telling you my story so that you may be entertained, inspired, learn something, become my friend, become my business partner. I'm telling you my story so that you'll know what I'm about and who I am, and if you resonate, let's connect. Let's share some beauty. Let's change the world together. Let's have some fun. I am 52 years old, and I've had a pretty exciting life ride so far. I've made some good choices, and I've made some bad choices. That said, enter, my friend, into Victoria Land. In the beginning, I was a vibration of unconditional love in the heart of Source. I decided to come to Earth and to help humanity evolve as I continued my own evolution and to have a human experience. I chose as my parents a poor, very young, uneducated couple from Southern Virginia. My father was a bootlegger, but when I was very young, he actually got religion and became a Pentecostal holiness minister. So I grew up in a very strict religious, but a very spiritual family. So yes, when I became a teenager, I was one of those PKs, preacher's kids, one of those wild teenagers because of all the pressure to be, I don't know, better than everybody else or behave better. Until I became a Jesus freak in my early teens. Now, for those of you too young to remember that, a Jesus freak was a Christian hippie who left the organized religions to eventually, we gathered in Christian coffee houses, and eventually, as we got a little older and people graduated from college, Christian communities began to be created. And I was actually part of that very ideal world for a while. We had a genuine community of sharing and helping each other. I got married at 17 during that time and had 3 very beautiful children by natural childbirth. And in our community, when children were born, the family had dinners and cleaning, childcare if needed, for 2 weeks after the new addition to the family. The church and many of the homes were built by the men in the community. And the worship services that we had, in retrospect, were really kind of pagan. We had a band that sounded like a Santana jam, and sometimes the sessions would go on for, at least an hour and sometimes more. And we sang songs in English. We also sang in non-human languages. I'm not going to get into that, but if you want to look up glossolalia, you'll see what that is, also known as speaking in tongues. My specialty was, and still is, liturgical transdance. And I think, again, reviewing this in retrospect and looking in the light of some of my new spiritual beliefs, that our group was in an ecstatic trance. And actually it was a very, very amazing spiritual experience. Natural childbirth and organic living, back in Southern Virginia at least, maybe not so in the West, but in Southern Virginia in the late 70s was still pretty out there, still pretty cutting edge. And since my husband and I were the first in our little community to have a child, and we had one by Lamaze technique and loved the experience, we decided to teach our community the Lamaze method and throw in also early childhood rearing into that with the Christian bent to it, if you will. life was really just beautiful and loving. Our family was hugely into The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, so that colored our really fairy tale existence that we had. It truly was. My husband had a wallpaper business, and I was blessed to be able to stay home with my children, my 3 children, and it was pretty cool. But one day, the bubble burst. The desire for power and control, the very thing that we had left organized religion for, because of, and rebelled against, crumbled the fairy tale community. Many of the structures remain, but the spirit, the love, and many of the original families, some of which are no longer families, are gone. Very, very sad. Very sad. Thankfully, in our community, there was no Kool-Aid event, for those of you who remember Jim Jones in Guyana, nor was there any physical coercion. But our family really kind of saw the things going downhill, and the things that were going on that were not of integrity, and left before things really fell apart. And we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, the foothills of the Blue Ridge. Life was still good, and it really got bad there. We just didn't want to be involved in that sort of thing anymore. And I enjoyed gourmet cooking. I taught myself. I began homeschooling my 3 children, who were kind of old enough at that point. We were kind of part of another community, but it wasn't quite as close-knit, nor did people have their homes all together on one common piece of property. By the way, did I mention that although I was an honor student in high school, I never went to college. So when I began homeschooling, I obviously had a lot to learn myself. I have always had a practice of, if there was something I wanted to do and I needed information, I needed to learn, I just go learn it. I get a book. Usually I just get a book. I mean, occasionally I'm taking courses, but usually I would just get a book and teach myself, which I had to do. Also, homeschooling back then, again, we're talking late 70s and we're still in Virginia, was pretty cutting edge. Do you see a little bit of a pattern here? My husband and I went to work with a group called Christian Aid Mission. This is an exciting time in our life. And it's an organization that supports indigenous missions instead of sending Americans to dole out a Americanized brand of Christianity. So we had guests from all over the world stay in our home. These were the leaders of their churches, indigenous churches, that were coming to the U.S. to basically raise funds for their mission. And most of our guests came from India, Nagaland. Of course, you know that's where we get Naga hide from. And Africa, especially Nigeria. I have some photos of my children sitting in the laps of some of the blackest Nigerians you ever want to meet. Such a treasure, and what a great thing to experience as a child. I mean, truly, my children just don't see color. Our life was just wonderful and enriching. Life was good again. But an overseas adventure was soon to change all of that. So thank you for visiting Victoria Land. And if you'd like to hear the rest of the story, or part 2, there are actually 3 parts, part 2, then check out Victoria Land Part 2.